Hi, I'm Jelle.
Hi, I'm Yvo.
Yvo, I noticed that you've been working a lot on EditorConfig. Can you tell me something about that?
Yes, of course. I work at the MSDC within Betabit.
Right.
That means that it's a special department, Managed Software Development Center, and we develop different software for different clients, and we also take different projects into management that we did not build ourselves. And when you do that, you work on a different set of code bases, and what is always different in those code bases is coding style, how the names are, how the variables are named, how the code layout is, all kinds of things that you use.
Yeah.
And it is always confusing.
Yeah, I've noticed this as well. As a consultant, I of course also visit very different code bases, but I've never had to manage more than one or two of them at a time.
At the same time, yeah. And we have, I don't know by heart, but I think that we have between 10 and 15 different clients. So, and some clients have multiple code bases as well. So we see a lot of different code bases every day, because when there's a small bug in codebase A, you need to fix it, and then you add a feature to codebase B, and
no bugs.
No bugs, of course.
No.
You always add features. Yeah, and it's always very confusing and distracting if the code looks differently. So what we want to do with the EditorConfig in the MSDC is to standardize the code base and make it consistent in a way that, at least it looks the same. So if you open your Visual Studio window, then it's familiar.
This is the old spaces versus tabs debate, but in hyperdrive.
Yeah. I actually have a meme on that. It's a very familiar meme that you can use for almost everything. And you see no difference. There is no difference, but under the hood, of course, there's some difference.
Yeah, there's still people going, why is there no text in that meme?
Yeah.
You'll get it later. Good, but are you saying that you have code that you get from a customer or that you manage on behalf of a customer, and you change up the styling and so if that takes a lot of time, I can assume that customers won't be happy to pay you if you do that for like days in end. So I assume that you have some trick to get this done quickly. And
it doesn't need to take a lot of time, and it can take a lot of time if you do things manually. But we are developers. We are about automating stuff. So of course we don't do it by hand. I have a small agenda for what I want to explain about the EditorConfig. A bit of the background, what I already disclosed, why we want to use it, and how that you can create, manage, and edit it, and how you can take it a step further in your development process. There's also some links. We'll put them in the show notes, I think, so that people can use that as well as a small background.
It was so funny, we'll show it twice.
Yeah,
right?
We'll show it twice because it's a classic and it stays classic. It's all about preference. Many things that you do in the EditorConfig are about personal preference, and you can always have debates with colleague developers. You need to, of course, it's not about tabs and spaces, but about different things in layout. Some things are more relevant, the way you use braces, the way you use spaces.
Yeah, no, so I think it's kind of similar to like UX, where yes, it's like an art, it's like a creative thing, it's like a feeling, but also there is a science behind it. People work in a certain way, and certain kinds of code makeup will work more easily for your target group of developers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, the EditorConfig file, it hasn't been always here. Somewhere back in 2010, people thought it would be a good idea to make a more consistent code layout, easier to implement for other people. So then they started the editorconfig.org project. It is maintained by some people, and you can find all kinds of information on that site, of course. The goal for the EditorConfig is to have a consistent coding style in different editors on different platforms for code bases that are shared amongst multiple teams, multiple developers. And the EditorConfig, it is about code layout, but also about code style, the things that you use. Do you explicitly type your variables? Do you have a variable declaration that says int age is 28, for instance?
Mm-hmm.
Or is var age is 28?
Yes.
That's also a preference that,
Yes.
that
I've
you can
spent
use.
many fruitless hours debating the one or the other, and it would be very easy if we can just agree and standardize
Bottom line, it doesn't really matter which side you're on. Just pick a side.
Yeah, at
that
the
you
worst
can
side
apply
is
consistent.
both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And changing it every other pull request back again. An EditorConfig, you can create that in different ways. You can maintain it in different ways, and I'll show some of that later on. The settings that are there in the EditorConfig, you have some basic settings, as you see in this slide.
Yep.
It can be about the indenting style, the indent size. Do you use 2 spaces or 4 spaces? What is the tab width? Well, the best option, of course, is to use tabs with a tab width of 1.
It's the only correct one.
Yeah.
Why do we even need an EditorConfig? Just agree with us.
Absolutely. Well, some other options as well. And the bottom one on this list is root. That is about the hierarchy of the EditorConfig. You can, when you have a large solution with a lot of projects, with files in different folders and also different types of files with different goals, then it might be useful to have a specific EditorConfig for a set of files. And you can have some different options in that EditorConfig that only apply to that set of files. And then further up the tree, you have another EditorConfig that applies to the rest of the solution, for instance. Mm-hmm. What we currently do at the MSDC is that we have one EditorConfig that we maintain in a repository that is shared by everyone. You can just clone that repo and copy the EditorConfig to the root of your repositories folder. And that way it will apply to, by default, by all solutions and all code within that.
Mm-hmm. And if you, when you say EditorConfig, you basically declare your intent, if I understand correctly.
Yeah.
But there should be some mechanism, right, where you enforce that intent, because otherwise it's like an architecture stating, we're going to use all these kinds of cool technologies, and the developers are like, nah, we're just going to code it out. So where's that connect?
Yeah, you can automate applying the rules. There are also some other code style settings, by the way, very interesting. But how you do that, I have it somewhere here. Yeah, Visual Studio has an option, enable code format on save. And if you check that option in the tools options, I can show that in Visual Studio very easily. I have a very small solution open, and if I click tools, options, in the environment settings, you have a text editor setting. And in the text editor settings, you have an option code cleanup. And you can check this checkbox, run code cleanup profile on save.
And that's off by default?
Yep, unfortunately.
Well, the default profile will probably also not be entirely to your liking. So, I mean, I would get really angry if Visual Studio would start formatting my code for me unasked in a way that I did not like. But
true, but the general default EditorConfig is not that bad, and at least it makes sure that you have a consistent coding style, that it's not different throughout every code file that you touch. But this way, it will, when you touch a file and you save it, it will run the profile. Yeah. And that profile, it can be configured more granular also. You can choose to apply which fixes, you can choose which fixes you want to apply.
Basically, you can mix and match, and you can say, okay, this one should auto-apply, this one, it's in there, but let's not run that one.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly. Here's a list of fixes. You can have multiple profiles as well, but I personally never use that. This is a list of included fixes that I already make sure apply to all my code. And there are some fixes that are not chosen in this profile. What might seem a bit different or interesting is that there are 2 fixes that explicitly mention the editor config, and I do not include them in my profile. That also has a reason that I will explain a little later.
You're keeping me on my toes.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes some tweaking and experimenting how it is used best.
It's the same with all kinds of automation in our jobs. It takes some setting up, and at first your Sonar Cloud will yell about warnings that you think I should really configure those out. Same with the EditorConfig.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to apply everything by default.
No.
And you have to learn the hard way sometimes. That is how you enable it. That makes sure that all the settings that you have in the EditorConfig are applied when you edit one file.
And you save it.
And you save it, then code format is applied. For instance, you see in this code file, well, this is a very small file with not much interesting stuff in it. Let me open another file that has a bit more code in it. Well, what you yeah, it is.
I think almost all developers...
It makes my eyes bleed sometimes.
But it's correct code. Syntactically, this is fine.
If I press Ctrl-Shift-B, the build succeeds perfectly fine. Yeah. There's no issue at all.
I do hate you for this, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. Small disclaimer: I downloaded this code from GitHub. It's just a code practice repository. Nothing interesting, but
okay. I'm sure the author is a very nice person.
Absolutely. Well, it hasn't been maintained in 12 years, so.
Okay, so just to make sure that everyone is focusing on the same thing, naked ifs, right?
Naked
That's
ifs.
what we're talking about.
Yeah, here we see a naked if because there's only one statement, right? But here's another if. It also has only one statement, and this one has braces. Yeah, that is absolutely the part that makes me cry at night. When I press Ctrl-S, you see that something happens here.
Yeah, it not only corrects the one thing that we both cringed about, but it also corrects another that we should have both seen.
Yeah, that is optional, of course.
Yeah.
It has added braces to the if statement, but it also changed the other if statement to, how do you say that, a ternary operator?
Yes.
Something like that. It's a shorthand notation for an if, because you can say, okay, I want to return something, there is a condition, is the condition true? Then return this one. If it's not true, then we do something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. For short statements, this is very nice and very readable. At a certain point, I chose to implement this one indeed. It gets nasty when you have nested ifs or multiple ifs. You can think of when you have some business logic and you say, okay, there is a condition. If it is met, I return one thing. If it is not met, I check another condition.
Right.
If it is met, I return something. If it is not met, then I check another condition.
Yeah.
I have seen examples when we had this option on, where that led into nested ternary operators, which were horrible to read.
Yeah, basically readability, that's your main goal. Then consistency
absolutely.
is the second.
Yeah.
And you skip right to consistency with your settings, and readability went out the window. How did you handle that?
Yeah, by turning it off.
So it's on here. If I would now add it to the editor config, I do not want ternary operators. How would it handle that?
Well, this solution doesn't have an editor config yet. So it is using the default options. And this is apparently the .NET way currently. So, okay. We can say tools, options, there's code cleanup. I can go to the C# section.
Right.
I can go to the code style section. And you can see a lot of settings here. It is a very long list. I won't go into detail for everything, but many things you can think of are here. For instance, expression body for local functions or for lambdas or accessors or methods. You can choose when possible, when they're on a single line or never, and you can set the option. Can I make this bigger? Yes, I can. You can choose to have it as a suggestion or as a refactoring or as a warning or an error. Warning or errors are higher level that are in your face when you run the build.
Yeah, I mean,
can also break a pipeline.
Warnings are annoying. Build errors can stop you from doing anything with your code.
No, you still have the checkbox also available. Treat warnings as errors, so it can break your build.
Right. Yeah.
All these options result in data in your editor config, and you can generate it from here. So you can say generate an editor config. It opens a dialog where I can save the file. I'll just save it in the root of my project.
Good.
And now it is saved.
Now you can select it.
Yes. You see it right away in my Solution Explorer.
Yeah.
It has been added. And if I double click, it will open the file. And yeah, it opens in an editor that is native to Visual Studio. This is a more friendly way to edit the editor config. You can also choose to open it in just some text editor. If I open it in the source code editor, then you see how it looks in plain sight. It's just some options with the values. And yeah, there's no syntax highlighting in this version, so that's not very friendly. If you use Visual Studio Code, then by default you will have the syntax highlighting. Generating it this way and editing it, adjusting it to your personal preference or the team's preference, well, that's a very handy way.
Mm-hmm.
You can check it in your Git repository and share it with the team that way. It will also be applied during the build. You can use it to check the code format in the build.
Yeah.
That's what you can do. This editor config is kind of the default one that was generated by Visual Studio from the settings that were installed in this profile. It's not really what I want. I have another branch. I should open this dialog to undo everything. Otherwise it will block me from switching to another branch.
Still edit the file, you might want to.
Yeah.
This is not a course in Git, but
yeah,
I feel your pain.
Yeah. I now switch to another branch where I did add an editor config.
Right.
This one has a bit more of the options that I do like. If I now open the same file that we had, back to the negative, you already see a green squirrely line here. And it says, add braces to the if statement, because it is not in compliance with the options that we defined in the editor config.
So, but that's a suggestion because you want that as a suggestion. This is not going to break your build.
No, it won't break my build, and it won't do anything as well if I build. Still the build succeeds. You also see a squirrel line in the namespace. We can convert to a file scope namespace, that's also an option. And if I now press Ctrl S, my entire file has been fixed. It is completely in line with my editor config.
I love that you say fixed, because the code is still doing exactly the same.
Yes.
But it's become more readable to you and your team.
Yes.
I could have done this manually, and for this example, it would have been quicker to just add braces to the if.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah, but it also fixed the namespace, the file scope namespace. I think it also fixed the var, because we have a preference for var when the data type of the variable is already clear.
Right.
So it fixes just everything that you don't think of manually.
Yeah. So basically, it's true kind of automation where you have one option where you, as a team, do not care about style and encoding guidelines at all, and you're just like, okay, just write it down how you like it, and then you get, of course, the pull request wars where the if become braced and unbraced on every request.
Yeah, that's where you need to apply it to the entire solution.
And you can do it manually, but that's a lot of work and a lot of maintenance, and this is an easy way to do it automatically, and I can easily see how this kind of consistency over a lot of projects would be really preferable.
If I open another file, it hasn't been applied here. What you want to do with a new project that you take into maintenance, or when you agree with a team on a certain coding style, is that you open the solution, no changes at all.
Just add the EditorConfig.
Add the EditorConfig, you choose this option, Analyze and Code Cleanup, run the code cleanup according to the profile we defined using the EditorConfig. You can see that this dialog, well, it takes a short while, even with this very small solution. If you do this with a real-world project,
you can have a cup of coffee.
You can have a cup of coffee. You can also use the power toy to keep your laptop awake, because when it goes into standby, it will stop the execution probably. And now you see that all files have been touched.
Also, I see that there's still a squiggly line under the variable not found here. Is that because your EditorConfig does not mention this specific rule, but it's a Visual Studio suggestion?
It is defined in the EditorConfig. I'm just not sure why this one cannot be fixed automatically. Because if I click the light bulb, it says fixed name violation to not found, because it is a constant. It should
have a capital.
Yeah, we have rules for naming conventions in the EditorConfig as well, and it is fixed by just applying a refactoring from Visual Studio. So I don't know why it wasn't fixed automatically.
You had it. You had it open, or you were messing around in it. So basically, for a bigger project, this will take a while.
Yes. It will run a few minutes, up to half an hour.
And the pull request, when you merge this back to develop, is going to be terrible, probably.
The number of files you have available in your solution, probably.
Yeah.
And if you have a good practice in your team to create small pull requests from, let's say, maximum 20 to 25 files, then you will break that rule with this pull request.
Yes.
So that's why you want to do this in a separate pull request. You agree, okay guys, there's a pull request incoming. It's only code formatting and code style.
Nothing else.
And nothing else. You should trust your colleague that indeed he did nothing else. Actually, someone I work with had a nice way of checking that. He said, okay, so there's this pull request with 1,000 files in it, and he claims to only have applied the EditorConfig rules. I'm going to do that locally on the main branch, and apply my EditorConfig rules, and then see if there's any difference in the pull request version and my local version. If there's no change at all, then the pull request is fine. Yeah. That's the way you can really check that.
That's a good quality check.
Yeah, that's a nice one. And then that's a very large pull request, but then it's done. And then you're good to go with the rest of what you want to add to that solution.
So this sounds like a great way for enterprise applications to standardize
but also
and
with
prevent
small teams.
cringe.
Also with small teams.
Small teams should do this automatically as well. Is there anything else that I should know about the EditorConfig and its possibilities?
Yes, because the main purpose, why am I so excited about applying an EditorConfig to the coding style? Because it's, okay, we have added some braces to some if statements.
Don't downsell it, this is awesome.
Yeah, but it comes really down to personal preference.
Right.
But the main goal for me is that when you have a pull request, you need to review the code that your coworker changed. He might have applied some really complex business logic, or maybe it was just a simple thing. But what you want to do as a reviewer, you want to focus on the actual changes that are important. Yes. So if there's complex business logic in it, I don't want to be distracted by invalid spacing, lack of braces,
wrong namespaces,
using int or string instead of var or whatever. Right. Because that's probably something with me. When I see things like that, it makes my eyes bleed.
And
it
the block
distracts me
prevents you from looking at the actual
absolutely.
implementation.
It really prevents me from having a good look at what is important.
And I think that's very true for almost every developer, where this is just how the human brain works. If I have a pull request of 25 files and I found, let's say, 15 things wrong with it, I tend to go like, okay, you know what? I think I must be done, because 15 sounds like a lot of comments. And if all the comments are, oh, the namespace is wrong, oh, you've added a line break that's not necessary, oh, there's some white space here. Then you haven't reviewed the code at all. And
it really stops you from reviewing the actual code.
Yes. Oh, wait, you're choosing an implementation here that's static. Why would you ever do that? That's the thing that you want to focus on.
Absolutely.
This is not testable. Okay.
For me, that's kind of the only goal for the EditorConfig, to make it consistent. And of course, when you switch different solutions and applications, it's really nice if you have a familiar layout that you can easily go to the core, to what it is about.
Well, I guess that's it. Thank you so much for
you're welcome.
Showing me naked ifs, and thank you guys for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye.